Have you ever caught yourself mindlessly scrolling through your phone, not even sure what you were looking for? I know I have. Just the other day, I was waiting for the crosswalk light to change and realized I hadn't looked up once. Crazy, right? It's like our phones have become an extension of our hands. First thing in the morning, last thing before bed, even in the bathroom. Don't worry, your secret's safe with me. We check them at stoplights, in coffee shop lines, at the hairdresser, the airport, the bus stop, you name it. But why can't we stop? Why do we feel this irresistible urge to check every buzz and beep? As they say, we're more connected than ever, yet we've never felt more alone. I remember when waiting in line meant daydreaming or striking up a conversation with a stranger. Now we're all heads down, lost in a digital world. And truth be told, I'm just as guilty as anyone else. In this video, we'll talk about why our smartphones have such a grip on us and what we can do about it. So if you've ever wondered why you just can't put your phone down, stick around because we're going to figure this out together. Why you can't stop checking your phone and how to break the habit. Now the question is, why does it feel so natural to reach for our phones even when we know we'd probably be better off without them? Experts say it's actually wired into our brains, and it's a mix of psychology and technology that keeps us hooked. Smartphones provide us with a constant stream of information, entertainment, and connections. Unless what you're doing right here, right now is the most interesting thing you could possibly be doing, your phone at some level represents a better alternative, says researcher Adrian Ward. It's a powerful statement, and it explains why we keep looking down at our screens even when we're standing right in front of the wonders of the real world. But is it really all that bad? Well, it depends on how we're using our devices. Let's break down the psychology behind smartphone obsession and what we can do to reclaim a little bit of that focus and peace we may have lost. The rewards that keep us hooked. Believe it or not, our phone habits have a lot in common with animal training. Psychologists describe it as operant conditioning, a way of learning that depends on rewards and consequences. Basically, if something makes us feel good, we're more likely to do it again. So if scrolling through Instagram gives you a quick dopamine hit, that little jolt of happiness you feel when you see a funny meme or a nice comment, it's no wonder you want to keep scrolling. But the tricky part is that rewards aren't handed out consistently. Instead, they come at random times, a concept called intermittent reinforcement. Studies show that this type of random reward is even more addictive than constant rewards. Imagine refreshing your inbox, not knowing if you'll see a new message, or checking social media, unsure if you'll get a notification or a like. This uncertainty actually makes us more obsessed with checking because our brains think maybe this time will be the one. So you see, mindless scrolling feels good, but it does not last long. Have you noticed how often you're reaching for your phone during moments of boredom? Maybe when you're waiting in line or even during a dull part of a meeting? That's the lure of mindless scrolling. It's something to do, a way to pass the time. And for a brief moment, it feels rewarding. But as some studies suggest, this habit actually makes us feel more bored in the long run. It's kind of ironic. Our phones promise to keep us entertained, yet they often leave us feeling less satisfied and more distracted. In fact, psychologist Aneri Melumad mentions that while phones can connect us with people and entertain us, the constant pull to check our phones can keep us from just being. Losing the ability to do nothing is one of the downsides of smartphone use, she says. Of course, it's not all bad. Smartphones have revolutionized the way we connect with others. We can message a friend in seconds, FaceTime family members miles away, and find communities with similar interests online. After a long day, there's nothing wrong with unwinding by texting a friend or watching a funny TikTok video. Sometimes that's just what we need. But the problem starts when we turn to our phones, not just for connection, but to escape. If we're using our phones to avoid thinking about real issues like a project we've been procrastinating on, stress in our relationships, or even just feelings of loneliness, that's when it becomes a crutch. And when we rely on our phones to numb out, we're actually strengthening the habit of reaching for them every time we feel even a little discomfort. So, what's happening in our brains during all of this? Every time we receive a notification, check a message, or see a new like, our brain releases dopamine, a chemical that makes us feel good. This dopamine boost reinforces the behavior, meaning we're more likely to repeat it. And with intermittent reinforcement, we're drawn in even deeper. we keep coming back for that little dopamine kick, not knowing when we'll get it next. Imagine it like playing a slot machine. Sometimes you win, but not every time. And because you don't know when you'll get that hit of dopamine, you just keep pulling the lever, or in this case, refreshing your feed. So the question is, why changing your phone habits isn't easy, but worth it. Knowing how these habits work is the first step in changing them, but it's not easy. And honestly, it's something I'm still working on myself. Breaking the cycle requires us to recognize why we're reaching for our phones in the first place. Are we actually interested in what's on our screen, or are we avoiding something else? One trick I've found helpful is setting intentional phone-free moments. Start small. Maybe leave your phone in another room while you eat breakfast, or try going for a walk without it. It's a little uncomfortable at first. We're so used to having it on us, but over time, you start to enjoy these small breaks from the digital world. Now let me give you a few ideas for reducing phone time so you can start living more in the real world. Each step is simple, and they're all habits we can build with a little effort. Let's start by understanding our triggers, then create boundaries, and finally use strategies to stay focused on the things that matter most. Spot your triggers. A lot of us reach for our phones without even thinking. But if we slow down and really pay attention, we might start noticing patterns. Are there certain times you reach for your phone more often? Maybe it's when you're feeling bored or stressed or trying to avoid a task you don't want to do. I've noticed that I often grab my phone when I'm waiting, whether it's in line, on a break, or just having a quiet moment to myself. It's like my brain is searching for something to fill the space. This is important because many studies show that emotions like frustration or anxiety can make us crave distraction. Our phones become an easy way to avoid facing whatever is making us uncomfortable. But instead of diving into our screens, what if we use those moments to recognize what we're feeling and find healthier ways to respond? When you feel that itch to check your phone, try pausing and asking yourself, why am I reaching for my phone right now? Is it because you're stressed, bored, or maybe avoiding a challenging task? Once you understand your triggers, it's easier to replace the habit with something that serves you better. For example, if you're bored, maybe take a quick walk or do a stretch. If you're stressed, take a few deep breaths. The goal isn't to push away our emotions, but to find responses that bring us closer to what we want to achieve. Check in with yourself. One of the simplest ways to break phone habits is by checking in with ourselves. I like to ask myself 3 questions whenever I feel drawn to my phone, especially when I know it's just a way to avoid the present moment. These questions help me stay grounded. Is this the best use of my time? What am I missing out on by doing this right now? How is this helping me reach my goals? Asking these questions can feel a bit intense at first, but it's a great way to check if what you're doing is truly worth your time. After all, if I'm mindlessly scrolling while I have a project due, I know I'm just making things harder for myself in the long run. These little check-ins can help us realize when we're using our phones in ways that don't serve us, and gradually we can start building new habits that do. Create clear boundaries. Now, let's talk about setting boundaries. I know it sounds strict, but it's actually a simple way to create a little distance between ourselves and our screens. Think about where and when you tend to check your phone the most. Is it the first thing you reach for in the morning? Or maybe you get lost in it at night when you're trying to unwind. Setting some rules for these moments can help keep you from slipping into old habits. For example, I've made a rule to not check my email after 8 p.m. This way, I'm not letting work creep into my relaxation time. Or, if I have to be available for work, I'll delete social media apps from my phone so I'm not tempted to get distracted. Creating boundaries around technology is about taking control of our time rather than letting our phones control us. It can also be helpful to turn off notifications that don't need immediate attention. If an app doesn't need my constant engagement, I mute it. Only calls and essential messages are allowed to buzz me now. Every app you download asks if it can send you notifications. But remember, you're in control. Most alerts don't need to pop up on your screen, pulling you into a new browsing session. You can even remove apps that add no real value, which gives you a fresh start. Use the rule of 3 senses: out of sight, out of reach, out of hearing. I call this the rule of 3 senses. It's about making your phone less visible, less accessible, and less audible. Think of it as building a little wall between you and your device. Here's how it works. Out of sight. If you can't see your phone, you're less likely to reach for it. Try keeping it out of your field of vision when you're working or focusing on a task. When I'm working at my desk, I like to put my phone in a drawer or behind something on my desk. This way, I'm not constantly reminded that it's there, waiting for me. Out of reach. It's one thing to put your phone out of sight, but if it's still within arm's reach, it's all too easy to grab it. The goal here is to put your phone far enough away that getting to it takes a bit of effort. When I'm working, I'll sometimes leave my phone in a different room altogether. If I'm out and about, I'll put it in my bag instead of my pocket. The extra step of reaching for it can make a huge difference. Out of hearing. If I had $1 for every time I got distracted by a notification sound, I'd probably be rich by now. When I really want to focus, I switch my phone to Do Not Disturb mode. This silences non-urgent notifications like social media and email. I don't need to know every like or comment the second it happens. Instead, I check my notifications at set times throughout the day. This way, I'm not constantly pulled away from whatever I'm working on. In our culture, we often talk about the fear of missing out, or FOMO. But there's also something called the joy of missing out, or JOMO. And it's about finding contentment in the present moment. Instead of worrying about what we might be missing on social media, we can focus on what's happening right here, right now. I'm learning that the world doesn't end if I miss a few updates or notifications. Life goes on and I can catch up later. There's real joy in letting go of the need to be constantly connected. It's about reclaiming my time and energy for things that matter more. So, let's challenge ourselves to take a few small steps toward freedom from our phones. Whether it's recognizing our triggers, setting boundaries, or using the rule of 3 senses, these habits can make a real difference. It's not about giving up our devices completely, it's about creating a healthier relationship with them. By focusing on the present, we give ourselves the chance to live a richer, more intentional life. So, are you ready to break the cycle following these easy tips? Share your thoughts in the comments sections below. And if this video resonates with you, don't forget to share it with someone who might need to hear it too. After all, we have to ascend together.